صلوا على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I begin in the name of the Almighty God, the Compassionate, the Merciful, the one who has created everything in utmost perfection. And may the peace and blessings of the Almighty God be upon His pure and beloved Messenger, the peak of His creation, the interest in the last couple of years specifically. And that is astrology and horoscopes. And you can see even our setup here in the auditorium with these lights above us. You feel like the stars are overlooking us tonight. Now, my dear brothers and sisters, in the last couple of years, especially since the start of COVID, there has been a lot of interest, especially online, towards astrology, zodiac signs, and horoscopes. In fact, according to some studies, every single day, about 70 million Americans check their horoscopes. You can see how much interest there is about this topic in our society today. Now, before we begin our discussion, let's define what is astrology, what are horoscopes, and what are zodiac signs. Who can define astrology for us? In simple terms, can you explain to us what astrology is? Anyone? What do you know about astrology? Yes, brother here. Okay, there are 12 zodiac signs. Now, this is one specific part of astrology, but in general, in astrology, what do they study? What do they examine? What do they look at? Yes. Stars and constellations. Any other definitions for astrology? Yes, sister. Afwan, can you raise your voice a little bit? You study the position of the planets and how they affect us, how they impact our lives. So we have a field of study called astrology, and we have another field called astronomy. In astronomy, we also study the position of stars, the position of planets. So what is the difference between astrology and astronomy? Yes, brother. Yes, that is the main distinction between astronomy and astrology. In astronomy, we are looking at the position of stars, the position of constellations, the distance between stars. It's a scientific study that's based on solid data and research. That's what NASA does. That's scientific. In astronomy, you don't make any predictions about people's personalities, about social events, about unforeseen events. It's just the study of the position of stars and planets. Yes, you can predict, for instance, when is the Earth going to get closest to the sun? When are we going to have a solar eclipse, a lunar eclipse? You can predict that with scientific calculations. But you're not making any prophecies. Now, in astrology, you're also looking at the position of stars and planets and constellations. But you're studying how do they impact your life? How do they define my personality? How can I tell about future events? By studying the positions of stars. That's the main difference between astronomy and astrology. Now, there are a lot of people who believe that astrology is scientific. In fact, 1/3 of Americans believe that astrology is a science just like astronomy. It's a well-founded scientific field of study. It's accurate, And it's true. 1/3 of Americans do actually believe that. But we have to make a distinction between the two. Astronomy is pure science. Astrology, no. Some science is involved in it, but it's not purely a scientific field of study. There's a lot of prophesizing in it. Unseen factors that you try to figure out. So that's to make a quick distinction between astrology and astronomy. The second definition, what are horoscopes? Can someone define them for us? In simple terms, I don't want a scientific explanation from you. In simple layman's terms, what are horoscopes? Yes, sister. A description of your personality based on when you were born. So basically, it's a chart that examines the position of the sun, of the stars, of the planets. Some of them include certain angels in those charts, on the day that you were born. So when you look at the position of the stars and the planets when you were born, you can tell what kind of personality traits you're going to have. That's the main idea of horoscopes. What are zodiac signs? Simple definition. Brothers, can anyone help us out here? What are zodiac signs? Yes. Okay, so the zodiac sign corresponds to what celestial object? Is it the position of a planet? The position of the sun. So the zodiac sign has to do with the position of the sun. And how many zodiac signs do we have? 12. We have 12 zodiac signs. So you look at the date of your birth and you see that it corresponds to a particular zodiac sign because the sun was in a particular position. And astrology tells you that you can figure out many aspects of your personality based on your zodiac sign, based on the chart, your horoscopes. Many people spend a lot of time examining all of this. So now we have a simple idea of what astrology is, what zodiac signs are, and what horoscopes are. Now, why do you think in the last 2 years, specifically, there has been so much more interest in astrology than before? Why? What explains it? Yes, sister. People don't know who they truly are, so they try to figure that out through astrology. But why the last 2 years? What happened in the last 2 years? COVID. There's something interesting about human beings. When you go through stressful moments, when the world doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, you try to find answers in unseen things. Studies have shown that when Americans are stressed out, they're more likely to check zodiac signs. They're more likely to study astrology. They're more likely to read their horoscopes because they're under stress. When you're stressed out, you develop anxiety. You have the fear of the unknown. What's going to happen in the future? So you want someone to give you answers. You want a field to give you answers. If you go to biology and ask biology, tell me, is the world going to be okay from now until next year? It's not going to answer you. Astronomy is not going to answer you. So people are looking for a field of study that's going to comfort them or tell them what's going to happen in the future. That's why people in times of difficulty, in times of stress, they resort to astrology more. They believe in zodiac signs more. They just want someone, something, some field to tell them that things are going to be okay. It's not the end of the world. In simple terms, In times of stress, it gives you some hope. And that's the nature of the human being. You want explanations. So this is what explains that in the last 4 or 5 years, why Americans have found so much more interest in astrology. It started with the whole political crisis during Trump's presidency. People did not know what the future of this country would look like. And then on top of that, you had the COVID crisis. So that's why a lot of people today are really interested in astrology. And so it's important for us to have a discussion on it from an Islamic perspective. What is Islam's take on astrology? Is there any truth to the study of stars and how they impact us? These zodiac signs, is there any truth to them? Do they have any impact on them? The position of planets and stars when you were born, does that determine your life? Your personality? Can you really tell about someone's personality through these signs? What does Islam have to say here? We know that Islam is a beautiful, comprehensive religion that teaches us everything that we need to know in this life. Now, astrology is not a new field of study. It's an ancient field of study. Thousands of years ago, people would study the position of stars and how it would impact them. Now, over time, why did people start to believe in the power of stars? People in the past would see that stars would have certain positions, and they noticed that sometimes certain stars can have an impact on events that happen here in the planet. So some people started to believe that every human has a star somewhere up there that determines his fate. And because they started to believe that stars determine your fate, they started worshiping them. Historically, the stars have been worshipped by many people. Why? Because they thought that these stars control your fate. So if I worship them, I'll be on their good side. I will get a good fate. Historically, that's why many people did worship the stars. The Prophet ﷺ was asked about believing in the power of stars to change our lives. Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib ﷺ was asked about that. So let's see what the Imams, what the Ahlul Bayt had to comment on astrology. Because that will help us today figure out what's going on behind astrology, behind zodiac signs, behind horoscopes. Is there any basis to them or no? And then you'll find some people who will tell you, look, don't study any of this. This is kufr, this is disbelief. Is it disbelief? Are there types of beliefs in astrology that lead to kufr or no? So this is the discussion that we will have with you tonight, inshallah. One day, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib ﷺ was heading towards the Battle of Nahrawan. The Imam was in Kufa. He mobilized his supporters to go to the Battle of Nahrawan. That's because the extremist Khawarij wanted to wage a war against Imam Ali. They did not recognize him as a caliph. They disbelieved in his position that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had appointed. And they wanted to make an attack on him and the believers. So the Imam had to defend himself. As the Imam was going to this battle, someone came to him and he told him, "Oh Imam, I don't recommend you leave at this hour. Don't go to Nahrawan at this hour of the day." The Imam said, "Why?" He told him, "It's not a good hour. It brings misery." The Imam told him, "Why? Why is this not a good hour?" He says, "We looked at the position of the stars, and it indicates that if you leave at this hour, you will not achieve victory. You're going to lose the battle. Don't leave at this hour." The Imam alayhi salam was disappointed with this type of mentality. The Imam alayhi salam said, "No, that is not the case, and I will prove you wrong. Are you replacing the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the belief in the stars? Does Allah control this universe, or do the stars control the universe? What kind of blasphemous belief is this? You want me now to put all my reliance on the stars? The Imam a.s. rejected this suggestion. And the Imam said, I am going to leave at this hour and Allah will give me the victory. The Imam goes to Nahrawan. He disobeyed the astrological suggestions. And what happened at Nahrawan? The Imam a.s. had a landslide victory against the Khawarij. It was a battle that lasted for an hour or two. The quickest of all the battles that the Imam had to participate in. Easy victory. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave victory to Imam Ali alayhi salam. So that proved that these astrological calculations were not accurate. Were not true. So we have here the Imam alayhi salam commenting on the field of astrology. Then the Imam alayhi salam in a hadith, he says, O Muslims, I caution you against studying the stars, except that which helps you find guidance on sea or on land. In the sea or on land. Meaning, astronomy is okay. Study the stars if you want to know where's north, where's south. You want to know about the position of the stars. If it's a science, if it's astronomy, that's okay. But if you're trying to prophesize and see the future, the Imam ﷺ states that is a type of disbelief if you believe that the stars have independent powers and they control the universe and they determine your fate. Because that replaces the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then where's God in this picture if the stars are running the whole show? Where does God fit? So the Imam ﷺ cautioned this ummah from believing the astrologers and accepting their prophecies. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ told his companions, he told them, look, if you believe that the stars bring down the rain, because the Prophet heard some companions or some people saying, oh, today it rained because of X star. It brought this blessing to us. The Prophet said, if you really believe in that, that's a type of disbelief. Because Allah is the one who brings down the rain, not some star out there in the universe. So if you're a mu'min, you will say, it's by the mercy of Allah that we have rain, not because of the position of X star. So the Imams of Ahlul Bayt have commented on the field of astrology. And the Imams of Ahlul Bayt have also told us that the stars do have some sort of impact on us in the sense that Allah has assigned them as signs. Allah has assigned the stars to have certain signs that reflect reality. Now Allah has access to that knowledge because He created that system. The Imams in Ahlul Bayt, they had access to that knowledge, how the stars are signs. But other than that, the Imam would tell us, most of what people know is not true. People don't know what these signs mean. Allah has not given them that knowledge. So when they tell you something, they may get some things right, but more often they get things wrong. So there is some truth to what the soothsayers would say and what the astrologers would say. Sometimes they could pick up on some signs, and sometimes they would get that information from angels. How? Have you heard of soothsayers? Soothsayers in the past. Who has heard of them? What does a soothsayer do? Any ideas? Yes. They tell unseen messages, yes. They predict some aspects of the future. They tell you about unseen things. Yes, brother. Okay, they received those messages from the jinn. So the soothsayers, they were human beings who had some access to the unseen. And who did they get it from? From the jinn. That was their source of information. Where did the jinn get it from? The angels. How? They would eavesdrop on the angels. The Quran talks about this. The jinns, the demons, the devils, the shayateen, they would go into the heavens where the angels were congregating. The angels have divine knowledge from Allah. They have access to ilm al-ghayb, to the unseen, based on what Allah tells them. And they would discuss future events or unseen details about our lives. The jinn would come and they would eavesdrop on them. They would spy on them. They would hear them. And then they'd come back to earth. They'd share that information with soothsayers so that soothsayers would deceive the people and distract them from God. That's why soothsayers sometimes would be worshipped. Or they would start their own religion and they would say, see, I'll prove to you that my religion is right. I have knowledge of the unseen and I'll prove it. And sometimes they would. Now Allah allowed this to try the people, of course. Now, this continued until the era of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. After the Quran was revealed, something changed. What changed? Surah Al-Jinn talks about it. What changed after the revelation of the Quran? The jinn were blocked. After the Quran was revealed, Allah created a new system. When the jinn would get close to the angels, what would happen? Meteors. They would get hit with meteors. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the unseen world up there, He would assign meteors to strike the devils who would try to eavesdrop on the angels. By the way, this is in the Quran, not some, mythical hadith here that we're not sure of its authenticity. This is in the Quran, Surah Al-Jinn and other surahs. The jinn, they would say, back then, we could go and eavesdrop on the angels and steal some information. But now if we try to do that, we get hit with a meteor. So that stopped after the revelation of Quran. That's why after the Quran, you don't really have soothsayers anymore. In the past, there were soothsayers. And that was their source of information. But not after the revelation of the Holy Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stopped them from eavesdropping on the angels. So a number of verses in the Holy Quran document that. They clearly speak about the jinn being warded off through meteors that would strike them. So astrologers in the past, they were connected to soothsayers and jinn who would give them that information. And the kings and the rulers, usually they would surround themselves with astrologers. Now the kings knew very well that these astrologers, sometimes they get things right, sometimes they get it wrong. They knew that. But they still would surround themselves with astrologers. Why? Why would kings do that? What benefit does it have for them? Yes. If one gets it wrong, the other one gets it right. But usually they were one team. They formed a team and they would give information to the king. The kings knew that I can't rely on them. It's a gamble. Sometimes they get it right, sometimes they get it wrong. In fact, they get it more wrong than they get it right. But still, the kings of the past, they would use them in their governments. Why? What other benefit does having astrologers serve? Yes. You have some more credibility and backing. What else? What other benefit? Yes. Control people. How? You're getting closer to the main reason why they surrounded themselves with astrologers. Yes. Yes. They give the king more credibility, definitely. But they also helped the king in times of failure. How? Yes, brother. Exactly. Blame. See, kings love to be surrounded with astrologers because if they make bad decisions, they fail, they oppress, they justify it through astrology. They bring the astrologers, they give them some good money, and they would tell them, say to the people, this was all written in the stars. Too bad. You see this famine that happened? I'm not responsible for that. It's not my bad decisions. It's the stars. They decide the fate. It's not my fault. They would deflect the blame from their bad decisions, from their injustice, to the stars. That's why, historically, kings were close to astrologers. They knew a lot of what astrologers say is nonsense. They knew that. And they would not make important decisions because of what they say. They couldn't rely on them. But they're like, you know what? They serve a good purpose here. I'm going to go to this battle. I'm going to make this decision. I'm going to confiscate land and property from people. I'm going to oppress them as much as I want. And if anyone objects, I'll tell them, hey, ask the astrologers. This fate has been determined by the stars. So historically, that's why many kings were very close to astrologers. This just puts things into perspective, why this was important in the past. Now, today, as we look at horoscopes, zodiac signs, astrology, these prophecies about your personality, is there any truth to it? Can I believe in it? If I believe that my horoscope has some sort of impact on my personality, is that kufr? Is that a disbelief? First of all, my dear brothers and sisters, it's important to know that psychologically, when someone gives you a generic personality description, you tend to believe it. And you think it's applicable to you. That's just a psychological aspect of the human mind. If right now I don't know anything about your life, I come using creative words, and I give you a personality description. And you read that personality description, you tend to believe in it. You tend to think that this is accurate, even though I know nothing about you. This has been proven through studies. They bring people, not by astrologers, no, by somebody who's just experimenting with them. And the person knows nothing about astrology or horoscopes. The person knows nothing about you, and he gives you a generic personality description. When he would give it to those people, and they were told, here's an expert personality description of you, many of them would believe in it. They're like, oh yeah, that's pretty accurate. Even though the person knows nothing about them, he knows nothing about astrology. So that's one reason why 70 million Americans check their horoscopes every single day. Because anyone who gives you an expert analysis of your personality, you tend to believe in them. You tend to accept what they say. That's part of our human psychology, because we humans, we're looking for unseen things, always trying to figure out aspects of our personality. We want answers. So anybody who is there is like, I'll provide you an answer, I'll accept it. That's the nature of human psychology. So now, is it okay to believe in zodiac signs? Is it okay to believe in astrology? Let's break this down very simply. If I believe that the stars have an independent effect on me, they control my fate, they control my future, they determine my personality, and they have that independent power, obviously that's shirk, that's disbelief, because you're negating the presence of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who determines many factors in your life. So if I believe that stars have that power, I'm just replacing Allah with them. I'm giving them divine powers. And that is it. That is disbelief. Historically, there were people who believed in that. Now, I'm sure no one today believes in that, at least hopefully not. The second aspect is, okay, I don't believe that these stars independently control my fate, but they have an impact. Allah has put these effects in stars, and these stars impact our lives. Now, this is not kufr, this is not disbelief, because you accept that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who controls the universe. You accept that He is the one who determines everything, but He has put some effect in the stars. That's not kufr. However, if I don't have ilm, knowledge, certainty about those effects, making any claim that they have an effect without evidence is not a justified claim in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Holy Quran says you cannot make a claim without knowledge. Let's say there are some effects in the stars. There are signs. Allah has assigned them as signs, and they could tell you some things. How do you have access to that knowledge? Did Allah reveal that knowledge? Did a prophet say it on behalf of Allah? We accept it. But if we're just guessing, if we're resorting to unscientific ways to figure that out, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not authorized us to make such claims. It would not be acceptable to make such a claim. The Holy Quran tells us, don't follow conjecture. Don't follow dhann. You have to have ilm. You have to have certainty. So, okay, if you're reading the horoscopes just for fun, whatever, maybe this has some sort of effect, that's fine. That's not to be condemned, that's not kufr. But if you accept these signs and these horoscopes as being a fact that's going to determine your future, no. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not given anyone other than His prophets access to such knowledge. The Imam alayhi salam clearly states that the Ahlul Bayt have access to that knowledge. If they shared something with you, accept it. If they haven't, it's conjecture. Don't accept it as a fact. Doing so is making a false claim against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, sometimes the Imams would share knowledge about the effects of stars and planets, or the moon. For instance, we have hadiths about moon and marriage. Is anyone aware of the relationship between moon and marriage? And when I say marriage, I mean the marriage contract, the Katb Kitab. How is that affected by the moon? Yes. Just like the sun has 12 phases, the moon also goes through 12 phases. Each phase lasts about 2.5 days. That's how you get the lunar month. The 8th stage, the 8th one in the lunar calendar is called the Scorpio stage. We're talking about the moon, not the sun. Al-Qamaru fil-Aqrab. When the moon enters the Scorpio stage. We have hadiths that doing your marriage contract, doing the aqd, the Katb Kitab, while the moon is in that stage, has a negative impact on your marriage. How do we know this? The truthful Imams have conveyed it to us. See, there is some effect, but we have no access to that information except that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us through the Prophet and the Imams. That's why scholars say it's makruh, it's unrecommended, it's discouraged to do your Katb Kitab during these 2.5 days. Avoid them. I think a lot of people don't care about that. People don't even check the calendar when they plan for their engagement. No. Avoid these days. We have several hadiths from the Imam that getting married at this time is not a good time. We know that the moon has an impact on Earth, right? Gravitational forces, the tidal waves. The moon has some sort of impact. The moon also has unseen impacts. One of them is that when you get married, while the moon is in the Scorpio stage, it's possible that the shayateen are more active. It's possible. The jinn are more active. So there's more interference in your life. There's more whispering of the shaitan in your marriage if you get married during that time. Now, let's say someone got married during those days. Are they doomed? Of course not. Pay sadaqah, pay charity, do good deeds. That compensates for that. Doesn't mean you're doomed if you got married during those days, but try to avoid them. You've got 27 other days to get married. There's no need to get married on these 2 days. So this is called al-qamaru fil aqrab. We have hadiths about that, so we accept them. It's not recommended to have your engagement done during these 2.5 days. It has some negative impact on your life, on your marriage. So whatever the imams have shared with us, we accept it. Whatever they have not shared with us, and astrology is claiming to give you that information, it's all speculation. If you believe that this is all true, the Quran says you cannot pursue something without ilm, without knowledge. So, to summarize this whole discussion in one line, if you want to read the zodiac signs, if you want to read the horoscopes just for fun, okay, it's interesting. Let me see what they say about my personality. Without believing that the stars actually control your fate, that's fine. You can do that, no problem. But to believe that they control your fate, they determine the future lies only with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah has put some signs out there for the future, but only the angels and the imams and the prophets have access to that. So whatever they've shared with us, we accept. Anything they have not shared with us is unfounded. And subhanAllah, you see people are always trying to look for hope. As we said earlier, in the last 2 years, there's been a lot of interest in astrology. Why? Because there's uncertainty. SubhanAllah, instead of resorting to Allah, the creator, the originator of the universe, and finding peace and comfort in Him, why should I look elsewhere? Why should I look at other aspects to give me that hope? If Allah is not going to give you hope, you think anything else in the universe is going to give you hope? A star is going to save me? A certain zodiac sign is going to bring barakah to my life? If I don't believe that Allah is the source of barakah, you think these objects that were created are going to determine your future? So this is the simple discussion that we have on astrology and horoscopes. Let's now open the floor to questions and answers. Let me know any questions, any concerns that you have about this, any personal experiences. This is the time, inshallah. We have a few more minutes. Yes, sister. Well, it's the phase of Scorpio, so you have to consult a calendar that tells you about the stages of the moon. So it's the 8th stage. There are some calendars that you can find, they publish that. Or maybe NASA can also, tell you the stages of the moon. There's a certain degree that the moon reaches. When it's in that stage, yes, you should avoid getting married. Meaning, not the wedding, just the engagement. We do have some calendars online, authored by some scholars, where they actually list those days. So, let's see if someone can look it up online. Is there a website that tells you when does moon enter the Scorpio stage? Can someone look that up for us? Let me see if I have the actual degrees. Okay. So, when moon enters the Scorpio, it's when the lunar sky path crosses the 8th sector of the zodiac. That's between 210 and 240 degrees. That's the Scorpio phase of the moon. The only reason why we believe in this is because we have hadiths from the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. They've told us, don't get married at this time. Why exactly, what happens, we don't know. This is unseen. We don't have access to that. But we trust the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. Yes, sister.
So
Okay, so you're saying that a lot of times it's accurate. Who's making that assessment that it's accurate? Right, see, that's the thing. Psychologically, when you're given a personality description, you tend to think it's accurate when it's not accurate. So do we have here an objective observer or someone who knows you really well and your character, and that person will testify that these signs are true about you? Is that the case? Or no, people reading their horoscopes are like, yeah, you know, that's pretty accurate. Which is it? Who here has a best friend and you know their character, you know their life inside out, and you've checked their horoscopes and zodiac signs, and it's all accurate? Any personal experiences here? So share with us your experience. So you know your friend, your best friend, and you've read their horoscopes. What, are they accurate? Sometimes, see, sometimes. They're very broad. See, as I said, you can bring someone who's creative and who will write generic personality traits. If I were to give it to you, most of you would think, you know what? This is partially true. Because look, in the end, we have some shared personality traits. We're humans. We have shared personality traits. So if I write 10 generic personality descriptions and I just give it to you randomly, most of you will say, a lot of this applies to me. Right? It doesn't mean that it's true. It doesn't mean that it's 100% accurate. So that's the idea that I want to convey. Yes, sister. Exactly, exactly. That's a good example. If right now I would come to you and I tell you, look, I looked at your zodiac sign and I'm going to uncover some aspects of your personality. And here's the first one. You are a sensitive person. Right? If I were to say that to you, most of you would say, you know what? That's true. That's because we're sensitive. We're human beings. We are sensitive. If I'm not sensitive, I'm abnormal. The second one, you know, I sometimes struggle with anger. Habibi, who doesn't struggle with anger? Right? Most people struggle with anger. If I put that as the next description, like, oh, this applies to me. Right? You're going through a rough time in your life. Habibi, who's not going through a rough time? Every stage in your life, you have challenges. If somebody comes and starts with these three, you automatically think it applies to you. We're all going through some difficulty, right? It could be a financial, health, family, whatever it is, some crisis. We're all going through difficulty. Parents, marriage, spouse, you name it. We're sensitive. We struggle with some anger. We have some family problems. There is someone in your family who's a source of your trials. Who doesn't have that? Seriously. 80% of the people have some family member in their life who's a source of their trial and suffering and difficulty, right? A lot of these, honestly, are generic, but they're creative. You've got creative people who make a living out of this, and they know what to write. It doesn't mean they have access, you know, to unseen knowledge. They're just creative in how they write them to make them applicable. Yes, sister. Yes, bring negativity to your married life. Okay, so sometimes in astrology you'll hear them saying that if you start your business, let's say, when the moon or the sun is in X stage, that will bring you success, right? There are some prescriptions like that. Number one, what's the source of their knowledge? My personal assessment is that they don't have a valid source. As I said in the past, before Islam, soothsayers would receive that information from jinn who would eavesdrop on the angels. But today, that's very less likely. They could be connected to the jinn. I don't rule that out. I think it's unlikely, but I don't rule it out. In the end, the world of the jinn is unseen to us, and they may have some information that we don't. And they may share that with some humans. That's definitely a possibility. So it could be the case that some astrologers get their information from jinn. And I think just last week you had a discussion on the jinn, right? Was it last week that we had a discussion on the jinn? We do believe the jinn exist. The Quran confirms that. So some source of their information is based on that. Sure, we don't deny that. However, my question is, if someone tells you, if you start your business or if you do this, during this stage, this is going to bring success to you, it's a possibility, but it's not ilm. Where are they getting that knowledge from? If it's from Allah, the Ahlul Bayt, the prophets, I accept it. Like the example of the marriage that we gave. It's from the Imams, we wholeheartedly accept it. But if it's based on speculation, it's based on jinn or whatever it is, that's not information that would motivate me to have my hopes on. Put your hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you're starting a business and you want it to succeed, start by asking Allah for barakah. Oh Allah, you're the owner of the universe. Bring your barakah in my business. Dedicate a part of your profits to charity. To Al-Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam and every project that has to do with Al-Imam al-Hussein. That's how you'll be successful. And guaranteed that will bring you success. Always make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the object of your transactions, the object of your hope. That's what defines a true mu'min or a true believer. So yeah, they may get some of their information from the jinn. That's definitely a possibility. Yes, sister. Okay, that's a good question. You'll hear some people opening the Quran and they just tell you secret things about your life and they'll prophesize for you. And sometimes they get it right. So how does that work? First of all, there's no hadith basis for that. We don't have a hadith that tells us open the Quran, look for these clues and you can tell the future. No. So there's no religious basis for that. So these people who do open the Quran and they tell you about the future, how does it work? Some of them could be connected to the jinn, and they get that information from the jinn. Some of them just creatively guess. Like I said, you can try any experiment, and you'll see that it'll work half of the time. Just study how businesses work. Half of businesses, they start good, and then they fail. Just go and read the statistics. So if I give that prescription to someone, it's a 50% chance that it's going to happen. And the person thinks, okay, wow, you know the future. So these people just have experience with others in society, and they can anticipate that, your business might start strong and then it's going to fail. Number 3, when someone tells you about the fate of your business, it has such a negative psychological impact, it could make you fail. I'll give you an example. Let's say tomorrow I have a test, or you're participating in some marathon. And then somebody comes and tells me tonight, look, I opened the Quran, I checked some astrological chart. You're going to fail tomorrow. Let's say the person is just purely lying. They don't know anything about that. The fact that somebody told me in my ears, you're going to fail tomorrow, that demoralizes me in my subconscious mind, whether I know it or not. Chances are I'm going to fail tomorrow. Unless I really have strong willpower and I can dismiss it. But not a lot of people can do that. People are impacted by what others tell them. How many of you have heard the story of Khaja Nasir al-Din al-Tusi? That strong philosopher and teacher. He had the strongest personality. So the anecdote goes that one day his students wanted to cancel class. They just did not feel like going to class that day. So one of them got very creative. He knew how talqeen works. Reinforcing something to yourself, how it works. So he told the classmates, let's say they were 30, he told them when you enter the room and you say salam to the professor, tell him, are you okay today? You don't look okay. You look sick. So the first one came. He told him, Salamu alaikum, teacher. Alaikum salam. Are you okay? You don't look okay today. You look sick. It's like, no, sit down. Let's start class. We're late. I'm perfectly fine. My health is as good as it can be. He dismissed him. The second one came. Teacher, should we bring you a doctor? You look sick today. He's like, no, I'm okay. Why are you saying that? He's like, you just look sick. He dismissed him. The first 10, he dismissed. The next 10, the 11th one, he started to doubt himself. Really? I look sick? Like, why? Yeah, you look yellow. You look sick. I don't know. They say, the story goes, by the time the 30th student entered, and he told him, you look sick, he was on the ground telling them, please get me a doctor. That's the power of talqeen. When somebody tells you something positive or negative, it has an impact. That's the reality. So that's also part of how that works. Some of it also, without confusing you too much, some of it also has to do with witchcraft and black magic. And if we want to give them the benefit of the doubt, maybe some of them are divinely inspired. The fact is, don't trust these people. You don't know what their source of information is. Did they, just guess it? Did they work with jinns? Did they do some spell? You don't know. So I would avoid consulting such people. Yeah. Yeah, some of them can be connected to jinn, sure. Yes, sister. No, the Imams did not tell us how the system works. Sometimes they would use it. They knew the signs. So Allah would tell them, when you see the star in a certain position, that means X event is going to happen. For instance, Imam Ali alayhi salam, on the night that he was struck, he was seen walking in his courtyard. And he would look at the stars. Imam Ali alayhi salam, on the night of the 19th of Ramadan, when he was in Kufa, he looked at the stars and then he said, Hiya wallah, al-laylatu allati wa'adaniha habibi Rasulullah. He said, this is the night that the Prophet had promised me. So apparently we conclude from this hadith, the Prophet told him, oh Ali, in the month of Ramadan the tragedy would happen. If you see the star in that position, that's just a sign. Not that the star is causing it. It's just a sign that it's your night. So the Imams, they had access to that because Allah informed them. They may have shared it with some special companions, but that has not reached us. We don't know how the system works. We just know a few things, like the marriage issue. The Imam says, avoid getting married during this time. It's not good for your marriage. It's not healthy. It could lead to some negative impacts. So we don't have that. It has not survived. Yes. You mean in Islamic events that it's based on the lunar calendar? The reason why Islamic events like the month of Ramadan, Hajj, and all these others are based on the lunar calendar is because it was the most practical calendar historically. Go back 1,000 years ago when people were illiterate. People, did not all have the means to have a proper calendar. The easiest way for you to keep track of the month was the lunar calendar. Just look at the moon. Even an illiterate person, an old woman who had never received any formal education, she would just step outside her house, look at the moon, she'd say, okay, it's the night of the 13th, the night of the 20th, the night of the 25th. It was just a very practical way, easy way for people to follow. So that's one reason why Islam based its events on the lunar calendar. With the solar calendar, it's not as easy. Like if you don't have some sort of device that shows you the exact angle of the sun, you don't know what time of the month is it. So let's say November 5th, right? Can you tell it's November 5th by just stepping outside of your house? You can't tell. You'd have to be an expert in order to know that. But the average person can't figure it out. But if you look at the lunar calendar and you see the size of the crescent, you know roughly which night it is. So it was a practical calendar. Not because it definitely has an impact on us, but it's practical. Number two, I believe the lunar calendar gives you a variety of seasons. The solar calendar is fixed. Let's say Allah would have told us you fast in the month of May. Ramadan is May, right? You'd fast the same season every year. But the lunar calendar, every single year, is shorter about 11 days than the solar calendar. So that's why you can experience Ramadan in the winter, in the fall, in the summer. You have different seasons. You experience the Hajj in different seasons. And that variety is beautiful. It's motivating, it's nice. That may be also the wisdom behind it. Yes, brother. Yes. How is that related to the khira? Yes. Even taking a khira to take a khira. You would not believe it. Somebody called me, Sayyid, I'm hesitant whether to take a khira on this issue. So can you take a khira for me to know whether I should take a khira on this issue? So yes, some people take it to extreme measures. Okay, that's a very good question about the khira. How is the khira related to the idea of opening the Quran and saying unseen things about the future? Number one, the khira does not tell you the future. The khira simply helps you make a decision when you're hesitant. It does not tell you what's going to happen in the future. It does not reveal the future to you. It just helps you make a decision. Number two, what's the basis for it? We have types of khiras. When you look at the ahadith of Ahlul Bayt, we have types of khiras. For instance, there's one type that you do with stones or prayer beads. We have a hadith about that. If you're not sure, take a handful of stones or a handful of beads. Make your intention. Oh Allah, I ask you for a sign for khair. Khira comes from the word khair, which means goodness. Oh Allah, bring me goodness. I don't know. Should I accept this job position or no? I've done my research. I'm still stuck. So you take a handful of stones and you count them. The easiest way is to count them by two. Draw by two. If you're left with one, consider it as a sign to go forward. If you're left with two, consider it as a sign not to proceed. You can do it also with a prayer bead. That's one type of khira. Another type of khira is called dat al-riqa'. Basically, the Imam teaches us in a way, you pray 2 rak'ahs, and then you take 6 pieces of paper. On 3 of them, you write, do. On 3 of them, write, don't do. If'al, la taf'al. And then, without getting into the details now, you do the salah, and then you randomly start taking those pieces of paper. And that will help you determine, what to do. That we have hadiths about. So we trust the hadiths, because the hadith tells us this is a way that will bring barakah to you if you're really stuck, and it helps you make a decision. It doesn't tell you the future, it just helps you make the decision. What about the Quran one? My dear brothers and sisters, you might be surprised to hear this. We don't have an actual hadith, a solid, sahih hadith about doing khira with the Quran. That is based on scholarly experience. There may have been a hadith that did not reach us in history. It's possible. Remember, thousands of hadiths got lost in history. The enemies tried to burn them. Sometimes the enemies would step inside libraries where you had manuscripts and they would destroy the entire library. A lot of the hadiths got lost, unfortunately. There may have been a hadith in the past about it, but today we don't have a sahih hadith about opening the Quran for a khira. It's based on experience. And scholars will tell you it's based on proven experience. Now some scholars say the idea of opening the khira falls in line with a qur'ah. Qur'ah is drawing a lot. Like the stones that I talked about, the beads or the pieces of paper. They're like, this is just another type of Qur'an, where you open random pages of the Qur'an and you read the verse and you see what kind of message is it communicating to you. If it's a verse about rahmah, about something positive, take that as a sign from Allah, this is good for you, proceed. If it's a verse about punishment, something negative, take that as a sign that you should not proceed. So the khira does not tell you the future. Some people, they call and they say, take a khira for me and tell me if this job is going to bring me a lot of money. No khira will tell you that. The khira will tell you, this is in your interest, proceed. Does it mean you'll succeed in this business? No, not necessarily. Sometimes Allah wants you to go through a trial. Sometimes Allah wants you to learn something. You never know. It just means it's in your interest to proceed. So that's how a khira would work. Now, the one who does the khira needs to know the meanings of the Quran. They need to understand the Arabic, they need to understand the tafsir, because it's important what kind of message you understand from the verse. If I'm not well versed in the Quran, I don't know exactly what the verse means. So I cannot be helpful in a khira. So you can have someone do a khira for you, who's first of all known to be pious, because someone who's spiritual, pious, who's a good Muslim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them signs. Number two, the person has to know the meanings of the Quran. So it doesn't have to be an official scholar. Anyone who knows the meanings of the Quran, they've researched the tafsir, and they are decent people, you can take a khira with them, that's fine. Any final questions? Yes, sister. The horoscopes, right? Yes. Right. So we do have a verse in the Holy Quran that states Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created 12 months since the creation of the universe. So the number 12 is a significant number in the system of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we don't have any sahih hadith, that tells us the imams correlate with these zodiac signs that we have today. We don't have a sahih hadith about that. That the zodiac signs that astrology studies today, these correlate with one of the imams. There is some correlation between the 12 months or the 12 stages or the 12 signs and the imams, but not the type that we have access to today. So the zodiac signs that you find astrologers talking about today, no. That doesn't have any correlation with the imams as we have access to it. Now you mentioned that some of these zodiac signs, they're predominantly accurate, right? Sometimes, like we said, some of it may have some reflection of reality. We don't rule that out. But it's not something that you can trust. It's not something reliable. let's say you get someone who's going to come to you and you are interviewing them, right? You own this company and this potential person comes for this position, right? You're like, let me look at this person's birthday and try to figure out whether he's going to be a good employee or not. That's not a reliable indicator. Islam says if you make decisions like that just based on these signs, you're doing injustice to people. That's the main idea. Don't make important life decisions based on these zodiac signs. There may be some truth to them. There may be. However, they're not reliable. And things can change. If I'm born when there was a particular sign, it doesn't mean I'm stuck in that character. Islam teaches you can change your character. I could be a stingy person. I can work on myself to be a generous person. I can have anger management issues. I can change that. I could be a selfish person by nature. I can change that. People can change their character. So to believe that you're born in this and you're stuck, in fact, one problem with these zodiac signs, the way they're being used in society today, I've seen people justify their nasty behavior by attributing it to a zodiac sign. Well, I'm Scorpio. That's why I'm acting that way. Don't blame me. That's not a reliable system. That's not healthy. So, the Imam ﷺ in one beautiful hadith, when he talks about astrology, he says most of the accurate information is not accessible to people. What is accessible to people is not helpful. Think about that. Whatever people have, some information about some personality traits, the Imam says it's not reliable. It's not helpful. Don't make decisions based on it. It could be true, but it could be false. Yes, we'll conclude with the brother's question here. Yes. Very interesting. Did everyone hear that comment here? So basically the brother is saying that based on his experience, in working with data and criminology, there's an aspect of the human mind that if you tell yourself, just to simplify it, if you tell yourself that this person, my friend X, Zaid, he has those personality traits. Let's say you read their sign or zodiac sign or horoscope. And your brain presumes that Zaid has those qualities. The fact that you've told yourself that Zaid has those qualities, you'll only focus on those qualities. And you'll naturally ignore other aspects of his personality. And because you do that, you think, okay, this is accurate, this is his personality. That's maybe part of his personality. You're ignoring the other aspects. You're only zooming in on these aspects. And so you think your friend has these personality traits. When if you were to objectively look at it, you'd realize no, that's not the case. As I said, we are humans. There are personality traits that we all share. Now, if my mind zooms in on that particular aspect, I will start seeing the person within that light. It's a distorted reality that you're seeing. So yes, that's also part of it. My dear brothers and sisters, thank you for participating in our program tonight. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will everything that's good for you. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring down His rahmah and blessings. Inshallah, next week we'll discuss manifestation. So I encourage you to bring your friends and family members to see what is Islam's take on that, because that's also big these days. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We just have a few quick announcements, my dear brothers and sisters, just a couple of minutes.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Thank you, Sayyidina, for that wonderful presentation. Just a few quick announcements before you leave. So outside, We have refreshments, pizza, and drinks ready at your convenience if you're interested. So as you're leaving, please take a slice or two and head out. Also, a few announcements before you leave. Next week, inshallah, registration for the